8:45 and we'll start. Before that, good morning everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Today morning, we're supposed to carry forward the foreign trade unit. So today we'll be discussing about export promotions in India, what measures are taken to promote export, and other relevant things like the evolution of export promotion policies, what are the regulatory mechanisms, what are the constraints. So all these things we'll be discussing about. But before that, I want to know whether I'm audible to all of you or not.
Yes, sir.
And secondly, I gave you a small assignment yesterday about IMF and World Bank. So have you gone through the names IMF and World Bank and gathered something about those organizations?
Yes, sir. Done, sir.
Done.
Yes, sir.
So actually we'll start with that, then we'll proceed. So IMF, as you know, it's International Monetary Fund and World Bank. How my question is, how can you relate them to countries with regard to export or trade? Anyone?
In terms of financially, like providing capital, providing finance to the country, and helping to boost the economy in sideways. If economy is booming, there will be more production. If there is a production is more, then there will be surplus, and if there will be surplus, there is a scope for export to the other countries. So simultaneously, it is a chain system. When finance come, when economy booms, everything gets on their own uh, uh, departments. Process is there actually.
This is actually a general phenomena. What my question was, how can you relate the role of IMF in promoting export or in helping a country to go ahead with balance of payment or balance of trade? How can you relate that?
Uh, in balance of payment or balance of trade, you can take the example like economy of the, you can say Pakistan. It is currently it is uh, dead to rubber, but IMF has given the funds to re-establish the economy, to adjust, because of there is a lot of liability on the head of Pakistan. So it requires funds, it requires financial monetary help. So when there will be inflow of the capital, definitely the economy will be run, means economy will grow.
And IMF has any provision to help countries like Pakistan? Which organization will help Pakistan, as per your example, the most? Whether IMF or World Bank?
Sir, what?
Uh,
Most probably World Bank, sir,
Why?
because World Bank helps in infrastructure and loans problem.
Loans.
M-
Loan is not a problem.
Sir,
To the,
Sir,
I meant to say that they give loans to certain countries for
yes.
infrastructure and growth of that particular country. So in that way, Pakistan gets help from World Bank at that time.
Okay, let me give you a clear picture of
sir,
IMF and World Bank in a few words, and then we'll proceed to
sir,
the.
may I answer?
Yes, may I know Prayas?
Sir, I'm Prayas. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, yes.
Sir, for answering your question, I think you need to look at the workings of IMF and World Bank. The
Exactly.
primary focus of IMF when it was created in 1944 was actually three
Yes.
primary objectives. The first was removing all the BOP difficulties that were existing at that time. The
Yes.
second was international financial crisis, which existed before the functioning of IMF.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the final that primary focus was to oversee all the fixed exchange rates that all the currencies in the world are bringing about. Because it was very difficult to trade with more than one type of currencies, which is why IMF was basically focused on. Later on, when IMF was so popular and more countries joined in, many different functionings also came into focus. So
Correct.
we can say that, and if we want to give examples of IMF helping countries all over the world, I can give a few. Like there were various types of depressions which existed all over the world, even though there was one big one. Except that other countries also face depressions time to time, which are small and we don't know all about them. But still, I collected some data, and here are some helps that it has helped the countries till date. First is Mexico, which was in
Yeah, yeah.
1982.
I would like to interrupt you, Prayas. Whatever you have told so far
Yes, sir.
is correct, is absolutely correct. Let me add two or three small points in a few words so that
Sir.
the part of IMF and World Bank will be clear, and we will proceed to the next unit because we are running out of time. Okay.
Sir.
So whatever you have
Yes,
told
sir.
is absolutely correct. In addition to what you have told, the basic functions, some of the basic functions of IMF is that one is credit tranche drawing. What is that credit tranche? In order to accommodate an immediate cash crunch for a short term period for any country, they have the right to draw at least 25% of the quota allotted to them to get the financial help from IMF. That quota of 25%, they can draw that quota, they can draw at a stage 25% of that quota, and that is repayable to IMF in 8 quarters. So it is like a business is running, you are running out of working capital and you need a cash credit from the bank. The bank has given you cash credit up to certain limit and you have utilized to promote your business. The same thing is done by IMF through credit tranche. Then there is some extended fund facility which is also rendered by IMF. This is comparatively a longer duration is given to the countries to pay off the loan. So that is also a financial assistance to adjust the balance of payment. If it is going in negative number, if the deficit is going out of control of the country, then this facility may be availed by a country to at least somewhat adjust its balance of payment. Similarly, there is another facility which is known as compensatory financing facility provided by IMF. This facility, it was introduced a bit later in 1963. This facility provides again financial help to those countries basically which are less developed, underdeveloped countries to adjust their balance of payment, and whatever financial assistance is given to those countries will be repaid within a period of 3 to 5 years. So these are the basic functions of IMF which helps the countries to at least balance, to maintain a balance in their BOP or BOT.
Sir, in
And
addition to credit tranche facility, we also have reserve tranche drawing facility, which
yes,
allow the matlab it's a member right to make drawing to the extent of the fund holding in their
yes,
currency.
yes, that is also called special drawing rights. Yes,
And the buffer stock facility also.
yes. So this is called also special drawing rights. This can be utilized by a country. Yes, absolutely. And next, talking about World Bank. World Bank directly doesn't contribute to promote your export or promote your to adjust your balance of payment or balance of trade. What World Bank facilitates is that World Bank provides for infrastructure, World Bank provides for health, World Bank provides for basic requirement to be fulfilled for the ordinary people. World Bank provides for education. So this is the base on which a nation will grow up. So in that regard, the another objective of World Bank is to eradicate poverty. And how poverty will be eradicated? If the people are educated, if they live in a good atmosphere, if they get good education, they will help themselves to grow up in a better way. So these things are the basic infrastructure on which a nation will be building up. And World Bank provides financial assistance for that. And in some cases, the loans, the assistance are interest free. That means they will be paid off to the World Bank in a longer period of time, but without any interest. And in some of the cases, the interest is very nominal. So that fund, if they utilize it to build a solid infrastructure, in long term, that contributes to the trade, and in long term, it contributes to the balance of payment and balance of trade. So it directly doesn't help a country immediately to take the fund from World Bank and adjust it to balance of payment. But in a longer term, the infrastructure helps the country to maintain a balance. So that's it. What I gave you the assignment. I'm happy that many of you have prepared and many of you presented their view in a very nice way. So thank you all. Thank you again. Let us now move to the fourth unit in your IBO 3 paper, India's foreign trade. So the fourth unit is export promotion in India. So export promotion, as you know, export helps a country to earn foreign currencies. So it's the duty of the government, it's the responsibility of the authorities to promote export so that we can earn more foreign currencies and we will be in a position to purchase whatever essentials are for a country. So what are the export promotions measures taken by the government? So first we will start with the regulatory mechanism in export promotion. For regulatory mechanism, there is an export inspection council. This export inspection council, as you know, the word suggests in its name, export inspection. Inspection is always done to cross-check the quality. Inspection is always done to ensure the quality which you are rendering to others. So as you know, for your use, you can compromise with some of the things. But when you are presenting something to others, you are cautious that yes, that person should get a good thing so that he will not be dissatisfied, he will not speak ill of you after using the product. Same holds good for a country. If we are exporting, we have to ensure the quality which is done by Export Inspection Council. So another mechanism is there. In order to make the export activities more effective, the export inspection agencies have been set up at 4 metros, previously known 4 metros, Kolkata, Chennai, Mumbai and Delhi. These councils, they specifically look after the regions and ensure the quality of goods which are exported to other countries. Then what are the export measures in India? What measures are taken by the government to promote export in India? So after ensuring the quality, what measures in your general thought you can think, what measures an authority or a government will take to promote something? Promotion will be done only on the basis when you are providing ample facilities to the exporters. or to the organizations which are supposed to manufacture and export their goods or service to other countries. So what facilities they need? They need every type of facility. They need a smooth supply of raw materials. They need financial assistance. They need exemption in excise duty. They need exemption in customs duty. So for providing these things, the government has established export processing zone, and let us start with export processing zone. From the name you can imagine, it's a zone, it's an area determined by the government, and in that particular area, in that particular zone, the organizations are permitted to operate who the organizations who are permitted to operate which are exclusively which exist exclusively to export their goods, their manufacturing goods. So as the export processing zone itself represents as a unit of export, so the regulations, that means the exemption in customs duty, the exemption in import duty, are applicable to all the organizations which exist in export processing zone. Export processing zone, apart from export processing zone, suppose there is another organization which wants to manufacture something and wants to export the entire of its production to other countries, but it doesn't have its existence in the export processing zone. So what that organization will do? For those organizations, there is a provision that they can register themselves as 100% export oriented units. They may not exist in the export processing zone, but they individually can exist as export oriented 100% export oriented unit. Benefits given to all the organizations in the export processing zone is as same as the export facilities given to 100% export oriented units. So these two, after these two, you can think of another promoting factor, which is as per the business standard, they categorize the export organizations into different they give export organization different status. Suppose an organization is doing has started up, gradually it's doing its business well. Over a period of 3 to 4 years, it has shown good progress, and on an average, if an organization does export on an average yearly 15 crore business on export, then it can be rated as an export house. And export house will enjoy some privileges, some extra privileges given by the government. So like your hotels, there are some hotels which get 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. Similarly, for export purpose, the first step is export house. That means you have got a status. You will get some benefits from the government once you are rated export house, and you don't have to get the approval every time before exporting your goods from the government. Once you attain the status of export house, the attached benefit will automatically be obtained by you, will automatically be availed by you. The next in export house is your trading house. So for trading house, you have to increase your business. Your business should grow more aggressively. And if you attain an average business of 75 crores, average business is 75 crores. If you take the previous 3 years turnover, then you can be rated as a trading house. Similarly, Star Trading House and Super Trading House. For Star Trading House, it is 375 crores, and for Super Trading House, it's most likely 1175 crores. Similarly, there are schemes for diamond, gem, jewelry export promotion scheme. Actually, this is a very theoretical part. and you cannot remember all the things written in your material. You just have to go through the side headings. You just have to remember what things, on which things the export, the government of India has formed any scheme or any council or any organization to inspect and promote. As a part of that, diamond, gem and jewelry export promotion scheme is there in order to make jewelry. If you import or you export gold, silver, platinum, so that will be somewhat your duty free if you come under the scheme, if you avail the scheme. Similarly, it is applicable for export of services if you are rendering a service, and they all are determined by our EXIM policy, export import policy. So these are the things, these are the measures taken by the government to promote export. Very theoretical part, and you have no option but to go through this part at least once or twice just to have a knowledge what things are going on. Similarly, there is another scheme I must discuss, Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme. In short, it is also known as EPCG scheme. You may be asked as a short note, EPCG scheme. Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme states that if you are an organization meant for exporting your goods, then capital goods, including your machineries and spares of machineries, up to 20% of CIF value. I must clarify what is CIF value and what is FOB value. Let me clarify first what is CIF and what is FOB, then you can understand 20% of the CIF, what does 20% of CIF value mean, and what percentage of FOB value. FOB means free on board. That means, in simple words, you can understand, FOB means the consignment or the goods you are sending abroad, the actual value of goods which are boarded on a ship. The actual value. It does not include the freight charges. That means the transportation charges are still not attached to that. And as you know, when goods are transported, there is a transit insurance done on every type of goods, and that insurance also, insurance cost is added to the price of the consignment. So FOB means the actual price of goods you are sending. CIF means cost, insurance, freight. That means the cost of the consignment, the cost of your goods, plus insurance value, plus its transportation, freight value. So under EPCG scheme, spares of your machineries, the subsequent requirement to run your machinery can be exported to other countries up to 20 duty free, up to 20% of the CIF value. That is a limitation there. Then there is also duty exemption or remission scheme. Duty exemption, you know, there will be some products, if you are an export oriented unit, the customs duty and excise duty will be abolished on you. Then for promotion, that is tax relief. You can obtain tax relief if you are registered. Remember one thing, whichever organization wants to avail all the benefits from the government needs to be, all the organizations need to be registered. Unless they are registered, how the government will know that this, yes, this one comes under our scheme and is eligible to avail our benefits? So first you have to register. In case a unit which doesn't register, but gets a export assignment, then there is some other provisions which we will be discussing later on. They can do that, but they have to pay the excise duty. But that excise duty they can avail, because excise duty or import duty can adds much more to the value. So there is a provision they can get that import duty in form of credit, which they will be paying later. We'll be discussing about that in a later part. So all these things, what others are left. Similarly, it's not only the responsibility of the central government, but also it is the responsibility of the state governments to look and share all those units which are meant for export, and to give them facility so that they can flourish and contribute to the economy. So when there is promotion, there is activities of promotion, there must be some constraints, there must be some hurdles which hamper export promotion effort. And as you will be going through the units in all the papers, not only export management or foreign trade, you will encounter this in marketing, you will encounter this in human resource development. First constraint will be for India is technology gap. Technology gap means we are lagging behind the advanced countries which have a better technology to manage. If we talk about production, they have a better technology to manage the designs, to give a very cozy finishing touch, very smooth finishing touch to a product. They have advanced form of packaging which we lack. So that technology gap doesn't mean that this is just pulling India behind. Actually, the constraint shows we have the scope to develop in these fields. We have to develop in these fields, these sectors, so that we will go ahead and can match up with the world. So like technology gap, there are some other factors. So can you name those factors? Another one, I'm just saying financial constraints, financial, it is quoted in the book, financial stringency. Stringency means rigidness. Stringency means you cannot avail that at your will. There are some formalities which you have to fulfill, and those formalities are very difficult to fulfill. So financial stringency is there. And what else? Can anyone add to that? The constraints in export promotion. Yesterday you added, those points only come. Hello?
Sir, the infrastructure.
Yes, exactly. That was the problem in the last class also for India, the infrastructure hurdle. And what could be some of the other points?
So one more point we can see as a currency, exchange of currency.
Well, exchange of currency is not a problem for exporting, because exchange of currency is somewhat related to the economy as a whole. We cannot just relate it to the export one. Yes, exchange of currency, if your currency gets devalued, then it has a negative impact on your export or import. But constraint, that is beyond. There are two factors. There are two types of constraints for a country or for an organization. One is internal, one is external. Currency, the valuation of currency is totally an external factor, because look at the current scenario. Masudi was speaking now.
Yes, sir.
Look at the current scenario. The prevailing situation in the world is beyond anyone's control. That is an external component. So every country has to fight with it. So they don't have any control over that. Similarly, if suddenly financial crisis in one of the friendly countries of India with which India is doing most of the trade, then that will hamper India's business. So those are external factors and that needs time to be addressed. But yes, that is a factor, but we cannot term it as a constraint. Constraint could be another thing you can add, Masud. This is the communication system, the digital communication system or electronic communication system. Because nowadays it has improved up to some extent. You must be knowing about one fact in sales agencies, in the
Sir.
private agencies, the persons in sales, they every day get a sales MIS. Most of you must be aware of that.
Yes, sir.
So many of them think that MIS is just sent to demoralize them. They are very nervous of MIS. But the actual purpose of MIS is that you see your image in the graph, you see your image in that board, at what position you are. So that is scope for you to improve. You should take it in a positive way that yes, I am at the 10th position. Now I will try to get up to the 6th or 7th position. So that an MIS comes on a regular basis. Similarly, in India, still now, there is no provision to get updated information every day on every sector. They are working on that, but it helps a lot because if there are 2 or 3 competitors and if they get MIS on a monthly basis, then within that month, they don't know what the other competitor is taking strategy to do and what they have achieved so far. So if it comes on a weekly basis, then it would be much better for the organizations to compete with each other in a healthier way, and subsequently, if both of them improve, then it will contribute to the economy, it will contribute to the trade of the country. So one more thing, one more constraint you can add to these export is electronic communication, lack of electronic communication or digital communication. The next part is your guidelines and guidelines for effective export promotion strategies. Now let us elaborate on that. Effective export promotion strategy. What is strategy? Strategy means you are making a plan to combat a particular situation. That is strategy. You are making a plan to combat a particular situation. Your strategy, your some short-term strategies combinedly make the strategy for your organization. Suppose you have taken a strategy for first 2 years, then you have in your mind the strategy for next 3 years. So combinedly the strategy for the whole 5 years will make the strategy of your organization. So export promotion strategy. For export promotion, we have made some planning. The effective export promotion strategy. That means whatever planning we have made to promote export should be effective, because there are a lot of things done on papers, but the actual reality differs from that. So how should we make that effective? So for that reason, we have some guidelines. That means if we adhere to the guidelines, our strategies for promoting export will be effective. So the government has issued guidelines for effective export promotion. And what are those? One is your product or market development. What I mean to say, students, you just remember these particular names, product and market development. It is not only necessary for export, it is not only necessary for import, it is overall necessary for your market. If you are appearing a paper in marketing, this thing will also come. To promote something, you need both these things. You should develop your product to match with the quality of your competitor. You have to develop a market for yourself. Developing market is also of prime importance, because you know some years back, India was supposed to be financially very weak. and what we considered ourselves that we are weak because of our population, because whatever we are producing, it is not adequate for our population. So what else we can do to promote our export? But things changed. The population which we initially thought as a cost to us, because we cannot serve to the need of our people, that population became the biggest advantage for us when it turns into a market for others to invest in our country. So we have a huge market domestically. Now it is easier for other countries to export to us because we have a large population and they have a good market to sell their products. But for us to find a market like our own is a bit difficult. So market development is done keeping many things in mind. First is that you should know what you are producing, the quality of your product. If your product does not match with the standard of those products which are manufactured in the advanced countries, then what will you do? Will you stop producing or will you shut down your organization? When you know that you don't have the necessary machineries, you don't have the latest technology, you don't have the skilled manforce to match with the quality of the products than those of the advanced countries, then you have to look for another market. You have to look for those countries which are at par with you or which are less developed than you. So it is the responsibility not only of the organization or the exporter but also the government to give some hints about where the market to be developed. So product and market development is to be done for any product, whether it is domestically to be marketed or to be marketed internationally. Then trade information system should be revamped, should be what I told just before. Our information system, digital information system should be improved a lot so that we can get updated information every day. And that helps a lot for the organization to rectify their mistakes and to match with its competitors. Then again, there is another factor to be taken care of, needs to be addressed, that is human resource development in foreign trade. Let me give you an example through which you can understand well. Suppose you have some problem with your water tap in your house. Will you call an electrician to repair that? Never. Because electrician is skilled in another field. He cannot serve your purpose when a tap is out of order. So for that you need a plumber. Similarly, export, foreign trade is a separate sector. And for that you need to gather knowledge, you need to have some specialized knowledge, and you need to have some persons with that knowledge working with you. So for that purpose, those persons whom you want to accommodate with you, whom you want to work with you, should be trained. And that training facility, particularly for foreign trade sector, to work in foreign trade sector, is not adequate, or some people intentionally, they don't go for that because they think they know everything and with their guidance those people can do well. But actual thing is that there are some etiquettes, some paperwork the person should know who will be working in the foreign trade sector. There is an institution in India which is renowned as Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, but apart from that, and it's difficult to get admission into that institute, but apart from that, very few organizations are there which are providing training in foreign trade to make persons skilled. So that should be taken care of. And Of course, infrastructure development should be given attention so that you can facilitate your export. And what other things are left in this unit? I don't think much important things are there. So anyone who have any doubt can unmute and ask me. Because this is not a difficult chapter, but it's a very theoretical one, which you just need to go through and remember some part of it, not the entire part. If you get the idea, you can elaborate on your own, because the constraints will remain the same, and the things which would be taken care of to improve will remain the same. So it is just up to you how you remember and present them in your paper. Till then, anyone having any doubt can ask me. So after that, we can move to the next unit. Hello?
Sir, all clear actually.
And today, I think after the initial phase, many of you are feeling bored, I think, because except Masood and one or two, no one is interacting with me. Let us take a break for 1 or 2 minutes, please. Those who are online, please introduce yourself.
Actually, sir, I have no doubts from this unit, but one from the export unit. So
Export unit. Which unit?
uh,
Export the entire.
no, sir. I
Um,
mean, I have a doubt of the assignment. Uh,
okay.
so
Assignment. On assignment, we will be discussing towards the end, because what my prime responsibility is to at least give you an overall knowledge of the particular paper. So today only we are dealing with the second block. So when we'll be moving towards fourth block, we'll be getting time, because all those things will be repeated again and again and again. So on those days we'll be getting time, and I will definitely give more clarity on your assignment.
okay,
Okay,
sir. Okay, sir.
nothing to worry. So next we can move to fifth unit, which is your trade policy. Now you must answer me. What policy? What do you mean by policy? Many of the time you are hearing industrial policy, trade policy, government policy. So what does policy signify?
A certified rule for a particular institution,
Yes,
which
yes,
he should follow in order
yes.
to in order to gain respect in the community.
In order to gain, the first part is absolutely correct. Just improvise on the last part. In order to gain respect in the
Not only
society
that,
or community.
not on that, on his particular community. Just like if the institution is a service institution, then he get respect and goodwill on that particular
Yes.
community.
So you just generalize those words. You can add in order to achieve the desired objective.
Yes.
Okay, that will be applicable for everyone.
It is.
The first part is absolutely correct. It is a set of principles to which an organization should adhere to operate and achieve its desired objectives, isn't it?
Sir, another perspective can be added that in order to control or in order to stop the problems or any uh, barrier or any kind of mischief also, we should frame a
That is a
policy
that is
so that
Yes, that is a part of the policy. The policy will include those things, because policy will be there to control, policy will be there to monitor, policy will be there to facilitate, policy will be there to smoothen the operations. So everything will come under policy. It is a set of principles which an organization should adhere to function, to operate, and to achieve desired result. If you want to achieve desired result, you should have control over certain activities. If they go beyond your control, then you cannot achieve your objective. So whatever you told, correct, but it is already a part of policy. Policy means the set of procedures, the set of principles which you will be making for your organization, which everyone will follow. So now, in the same way, What will be trade policy? The set of instructions, the set of principles which will be applicable for trade. And trade policy, specifically it is for, we will be discussing about India's trade policy. So, you can divide the trade policy in India into two parts. Again, it's a theoretical part. One thing in the previous class we already discussed. Up to 1990 or 91, India was in firm belief that we will go for indigenous product. We will promote our manufacturers only. We will not allow others to operate in our country. But that assumptions did not prove well for India. So whatever trade policy was done till now, you can divide it after independence to 1991 and then after liberalization after 1991 to till date. So you can have a rough figure in your mind that before 1991, after independence to 1991, policies definitely were made. Policies were made to promote trade, basically to promote domestic trade, and whatever policy was made to promote foreign trade did not prove to be that much successful. Otherwise, we would not have been in a condition that we had to place gold in other countries to survive, to at least balance our deficit of foreign currency reserve at that time. So, the prior to 1991 part you can take care of, there is nothing much important into that. But after 1991, when we opened our economy to others, then the policy needs to be amended, the policy, new policy needs to be implemented at that time. And the first thing is that after 1991, what we talked about, export promotion capital goods scheme, EPCG, that was introduced. Then your EXIM policy came into force, export import policy. Export import bank was also incorporated to promote finance to the exporters or importers. And this policy mainly focused, after 1991, they mainly focused on the need to get exporters concentrate on manufacturing and marketing their products globally. Later on, the policy also extended to service sector, and the service sector in India is doing very well. So, what are the basic feature of those export policy, trade policy? Trade policy, that means there will be some export policy. The policy will exist for export, policy will exist for import. So for export policy, you may go through the book, but generally things will come to your mind. Suppose you are the authority and you want to promote export. So what in your policy will you include to export that? Immediately 2 or 3 things will come into your mind. You will exempt some government taxes. That means there will be some exemption on the turnover as far as excise duty and customs duty are concerned. Then there is some provision made in export policy that you can export some material as gift and it will not be taxed, but the value will remain within 1 lakh rupees Indian currency. Then if you are exporting machinery, then also you are exempted, tax exempted from sending the spares of those machineries if required by the third party or by the party which has purchased from you. But there is a condition: if you have sold machineries to other countries or to other parties abroad, you have the limit to export spares up to 7.5% of the value of that machinery. Suppose the machine costs 1 lakh rupees, so you have the liberty to export spares up to 7,500 rupees, up to the value of 7,500 rupees as duty free. If values go beyond that, you have to pay tax on that. So what else could be added? Nothing much more important. Export of imported goods. That means, suppose you have given warranty for your machine. It has been exported to South Africa. Then some machines, they did not work well and needed to be replaced. And in that case, those not working machines, they will come back to you again. Either you will repair them or you will replace them. So just mark my point. You have already exported those things. Some of the machineries, they did not work well there. They are returned back to you. So that will be called import of exported item. And once and because you have given them warranty, either you have to repair those items or you have to replace those items. Then again, when you are replacing or sending them after repairing, that will be considered as export of re-imported thing. And those things will also be exempted from any type of tax. Similarly, if the policies are for export, similarly there will be policy for import. Whatever points we have discussed, the same will hold good for import organization, for import policy. The organizations which will be importing, and if they are registered under 100% export oriented unit, whatever they will be importing, they will be using it as raw materials and manufacture those goods which will be exported later on. So they will be tax exempted. So for them, what the policy provisions say, what are the facilities given to them, in the same way they will be tax exempted if they import gifts up to value of 1 lakh. And one more thing will be added to that. Do you know what sale on siege means? Sale on high siege. Do you know that concept? Sale on high siege.
No, sir.
Okay.
So
Let me give you an example.
So it's a no man's
Yes.
land. It's a no man's land.
You guessed it, but it's not like that. Sale on high siege means, let me give you an example so that you can understand. Suppose you have sent a consignment to another party in Italy or in Spain. Now you have sold that one and you have dispatched your consignment, but due to some reason, due to some unavoidable circumstance, the party which has purchased the goods from you wants to sell that to another party. How it will be done? It will be done because, as you know, in international trade there is a facility called letter of credit, and you have sold to that party. That means you have obtained your price. You have got your price through letter of credit. So nothing to worry for you. Now it is the responsibility of the buyer how he will get back the money. Now the buyer is not in a position to purchase or store those goods. He wants to sell it to someone else. but the goods have not physically reached the port or reached the destination. But in this case, the buyer can sell it to another entity, another person or another business organization, and the selling process can be done. This selling process is known as sell on high seas. That means the consignment is still in the seas. It has not reached its destination, but the buyer has sold it to someone else. Get it? So, as an exporter, if you are selling it, or as an importer, if you are purchasing it, then also you can avail the exemption in customs and excise duty. This is a new feature. And what else? Nothing more important than that. We may move to the next one. So what are there next? Can anyone tell me? Yes. No one is interacting now except one or two. Feeling really bored.
Sir, industrial and investment policy.
Industrial and investment policy. So nothing more in trade policy. Do you have the book?
Sir,
Anything
we have
to be
the
explained?
import policy, tariff policy.
Yeah. So yes, you tell me tariff policy. What does tariff signify? What does tariff mean? In simple words.
Sir, duties.
Tariff, not exactly duties. Duty is included in tariff, but tariff is not duty.
Sir, export import duties.
Now you are only relating it to export and import. If you are staying at a hotel, or you are inquiring a hotel about its accommodation and fooding facility, first you are asking the hotel, what is your tariff? Tariff means the final price, including your tax and all those government formalities. So tariff, that means in this case, tariff will represent the duty, the excise duty or the customs duty or the government taxes. Tariff means the final rate. And because you know the, suppose you are purchasing something from the from other countries or something from a foreign organization, you know the rate of that particular thing. After adding tax, you know the final rate, that is tariff, and here tariff only will determine the tax or duty imposed on that particular imported material. What else?
Sir, the WTO regime and the India's policy making. Last topic of this unit.
Okay, very good, very good. So WTO, what does it stand for?
World Trade Organization.
World Trade Organization.
World Trade Organization. From the name, what you guess? What would be its main function? What would be its
Trading
main
purpose.
objectives?
World trading purpose. It has the
Just to add, to facilitate world
yes,
trading,
yes.
to facilitate world trading. So, how it will facilitate? If you are a facilitator for students, then how will you facilitate the process of learning?
Setting up the mechanism.
Yes, by creating path towards the exporting services.
By creating a friendly atmosphere, will be acceptable to all your countries. So
By
WTO,
making available the proper technology.
yes, the basic objective of World Trade Organization will be to facilitate world trade, to facilitate trade between countries. So the way how it will facilitate, yes, that will be a part, to facilitate technology, to facilitate those things which are creating hindrance to the trade. So, and there will be one more thing, apart from facilitating only, like someone said just 5-10 minutes back, it needs to have control. मनमानी कोई नहीं कर सकता, ये भी उसको देखना पड़ेगा. So WTO also have some restrictions, which is also known as quantitative restrictions. That means certain goods cannot be exported at will or cannot be imported at will. They will undergo some restrictions. Then there is a
You can say
trade.
that you can say that WTO can be act as a watchdog.
WTO, yes, it keeps a watch on the trade.
Yes.
Because it has to look for those things because there are some limitations in certain materials which cannot be exported or imported at will. The countries cannot do like that. So it keeps a watch on those trade. It also keeps watch on patents. It also keeps watch on intellectual property rights, so that it cannot be, it won't be, it doesn't get violated. So all these things are taken care of WTO. Do you know what is patent? What does this patent word?
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
patenting is to reserve our rights over our services or our product
Yes. For which purpose? You have the right over your product.
Duplicating,
so that anybody else cannot misuse our rights.
from duplicating.
Anybody cannot misuse. Suppose you are manufacturing something, I purchase that. If I misuse, then you won't be held responsible for that because I utilized it in a negative way. So patent means your right to manufacture that product with the composition, with the elements, with the ingredients which you have used. That will be patented. That will be authorized. No other manufacturer can use the same type of material in the same proposition, in the same operational process to manufacture that. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Patent means you have the sole right. Let me give an example. Suppose BMW is manufacturing cars, Mercedes is also manufacturing cars, Audi is also manufacturing cars. The technology, the main technology of car will remain the same. It will be driven by an engine. Either it will be 5-seaters or 7-seaters. There will be 4 doors or 5 doors. The basic concept will remain the same. But the engine manufactured in the way by BMW will not be the same with Mercedes. It will vary. Same Audi will use a different proposition. Final product will be a car, but they are manufactured in different way than others. So that is patent. No one can violate that. But sometimes like someone replied me, you cannot misutilize it. You cannot utilize it at your will. That is called copyright. Okay. Those are applicable for films, scripts, your thesis, your articles. Those are applicable for that. Because someone cannot copy your thing and represent it as its own. Someone cannot show a film without your consent to everyone. That is called copyright. Same thing, but patent is applicable for some manufactured goods and copyright is applicable for some written or visual documents. Okay. Same thing also holds good for designing. Designing has to differ. The same design cannot be done by another. But you know, if you hallmark is another thing. Hallmark is if your product is being marketed with a specific name and sign, that name and sign cannot be utilized by others to market their product. That is hallmark.
Okay, sir.
And that is called trademark.
Hallmark is the sign of purity.
Hallmark is the sign of purity which you are getting in form of gold, and BIS is now the standard procedure. for which you will be assured of your quality. Exactly, exactly. Just a silly mistake from my side. Hallmark is the sign of purity. Trademark, what I told. Trademark means you are selling your product under a particular name and logo. That name and that logo cannot be used at will by other one. And hallmark is the sign of purity. For gold, it is how much? Which gold is now supposed to be pure? BIS hallmark. Do you know BIS hallmark, which is called 912? Hallmark 912. That means this signifies gold is pure up to 91.2%. Because 100% gold cannot be turned into ornaments. So that is scope to make something with that. So up to 91, if the ornament contains 91.2% of gold, that will come under BIS and it will be certified as pure gold, quality gold. So these things are taken care of: patent, copyrights, trademark, designs. They cannot be copied, and the World Trade Organization should keep an eye on these things. So after this, we can go to industrial and investment policy again. What are the industrial policies and investment policy for India? Industrial policy. Again, you can divide it into two parts. Yes, someone is asking me something.
No, sir, I was saying that industrial policy in 1991, that liberalization and globalization by Manmohan
Yes,
Singh.
very good. Now you have got my point. Whenever you are talking about policies, about resolutions, about the reformation steps, whenever you will be coming across them, those, you divide it into two parts. One is prior to 1991, one is after 1991. So industrial policy are also existing before 91. And we were acting as per the policy resolutions. But after 1991, major reformation took place. So whatever given in your book, you should give focus on the part which describes reformation or policies after 91. From 1991, you should look after that. So industrial policy, let me give you a general impression of industrial policy after 1991, because before 1991 it doesn't carry much significance long ago, and those did not those were having, actually before 91 there are a lot of provisions for small industries, but in reality small scale industries did not flourish till 1991 so much. Later on, after 1991, when the economy was opened, liberalized, other investors came, they created employment opportunity, production grew up, trade grew up, everything was okay. But in a vast country like India, you just think how the government will keep on creating employment for everyone to be absorbed. Let me give you an example. Suppose government is establishing an industry with an investment of, let us assume, 5,000 crores. Heavy industry with an investment of 5,000 crores. So in that industry of investment 5,000 crores, how many employees, how many employment opportunities will be created? At best 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, let us assume. So with 5,000 crore investment, the government will be able to create 10,000 employment. Later on, the government realized that if we keep on financing small units to be established, and if these small units work properly, then we have a better chance of creating employment than that of these heavy industries. Again, we can compare the example with the previous one. Suppose a small industry, it needs, 5 lakhs. to start with, small business unit. And with a 5 lakhs or 6 lakh investment, it can accommodate at least 3 to 4 people. Because as for the thumb rule, if investment is 5 lakh, excluding you will be having 4 employees. So for 5 lakh investment, they are creating 5 employment. So for 1 crore, it will be 100 employment. For 100 crore, it will be 10,000 employment. For 1,000 crore, it will be 1 lakh employment. So if you compare it with 5,000 crore investment, by the way, they invest 5,000 in small units, the government will be able to create at least 5 lakh employments. And that part when creep into the mind of government authorities, they started giving more importance to small scale industries, and as a part of that policy, the small export units, suppose we can take the example of Applic Works, we can take the examples of the small organizations which have some greater value, which have some admiration for their products abroad. They can come under this category, avail all the export benefits of the government, and can export for the country, earn foreign currencies. So these things actually change after, let's assume after 2000, actually these things change, and nowadays banks, government, everyone is giving facility, is giving you opportunity to establish something of your own. And just 10-15 days back, the government has already announced that the small industry, the investment limit for small industry has been risen up to 10 crore. So an industry with an investment of 10 crore will be considered as small. That means though you will be a crorepati, you will be availing all the benefits of the government, whether it is an export unit, whether it is a manufacturing unit, to serve the purpose of the domestic market. So if you understand, hello, someone is Masood, I think somewhere disturbance is coming from the sideline. You are okay, but noise is coming from periphery. Now it's okay. So if you understand this inner point, you can understand what the policies will be for industry, what will be the policies for investment. So keeping this thing in mind, we can go forward. There is evolution of industrial policy, which is of not much importance. You just go through it theoretically. 1954, 1956 doesn't matter. You should concentrate on the policies which is after 1991, because question, if it will come for 1991. So in 1991, they took different measures. That means you know about domestic regulatory reforms. So that means domestic regulatory reforms means some sectors were specifically meant for public sectors to take over. That means some organizations can only be acquired or can be run by public sector. Public sector means in which the government has more than 50% share. Now that was abolished. It was opened to private players also. Industrial licensing, except a few things, are abolished. Anyone can start up his own industry. Another thing is written there: removal of mandatory convertibility clause. All of you may not be knowing this one. Removal of mandatory convertibility clause. Previously, these were strictly implemented by banks, by commercial banks. How I can explain you? Okay, take an example. Suppose someone is borrowing from a bank. The bank has fixed its lending rate, suppose at 10%. But what happens? Time to time, the interest rate is changing because the RBI is changing its repo rate, and accordingly the bank is also changing its rate on deposits, interest rate on deposits to be given to the investors, to the depositors. Previously, if it is fixed 10% for a person who is borrowing from the bank, if the interest rate goes down to 9%, then he will not be eligible to pay at 9% interest. If he is giving at 10%, he will be giving at 10% till the end of the loan repayment. But if it is up to 11%, the bank might charge him the higher rate of interest, convertibility option, for going higher. And that was a bit problematic for the borrowers, because the interest rate, if it goes down, the borrower doesn't get any benefit. If it goes high, then there might be a chance that he will pay more interest on the borrowed amount. That was removed. Nowadays you hear minimum lending rate. The minimum lending rate should be fixed by a bank as per the instruction of the RBI. If the interest rate, repo rate goes down by RBI, automatically the lending rate will go down. And nowadays, if the customer is paying a loan at 10% rate of interest, and if the interest rate goes down, he is also eligible to pay off the loan at the lower rate. So that is an advantage. That's a big advantage, in fact. That is called removal of mandatory convertibility clause. Then foreign investment, removal foreign investment. Foreign investment, as you know, before 1991 there was no scope. After 1991 it began, and in the process gradually the limit for foreign investors to invest increased. Previously for some sectors it was, for insurance sector it was 26%, from some other sectors it was up to 49%. Now it has been increased. For many sectors it has gone up to 100%, like establishing hospital, like establishing your airport maintenance, like things. But for some essential things, it has been raised up to 49%. So those foreign investments are allowed now. And one more thing to add, have you ever heard of automatic route?
No, sir.
Automatic.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I couldn't hear you.
And yes, yes,
yes.
I know automatic.
Automatic route. Please elaborate on that. Automatic route.
So the automatic route is the, you can say in the very few words, that there will be no interference from the government side or any regulatory side. It will be between two companies, like a company from the foreign and the company from the Indian economy will deal the or sign a FDI regarding the investment, whether in form of capital or equity or transfer of technology or some other services which is linked to their business ethics actually. We can
very good, very good.
Like Geo has been raising the fund from various fund houses and companies around the quarter during the pandemic also, and it is seen that how the Indian market has been focuses on the demand, what you said earlier, that now the India have the huge customer for raising the demand, and the companies are seeing India as a best opportunity to invest also.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Can you name those companies which are acquiring shares in Geo, apart from Facebook?
Apart from Facebook, you can say a company from Abu Dhabi, it is there. KKR, it is there. And then Silver Lake is there.
Silver Lake is there, yes.
And yes,
it is Silver Lake, in fact, invested in two phases. First it purchased a part, then again it reinvested more. Okay, whatever you told about Masood, let me continue. The automatic route, what Masood has told, it can be done directly between two entities, two organizations, without any approval of the government or the RBI, except some restricted items. Just add that. That will do for you. So now you can. Yes.
What are those restricted items?
Restricted items which will hamper the national interest. Suppose it is defense items, artillery.
Sir, I can give an example.
Yes, you can go on. But basically,
Sir,
defense items. Huh.
currently, the government of India has banned any investment coming from neighborhoods of the India in order to tackle China investment.
Has it taken place? Are you confirmed?
Yes, government has notified also that China will, if any investment coming across the neighboring countries, it has to take the prior approval from the government of India, and then it will be implemented. The automatic route from these countries have been barred for the timing.
Okay, thanks for the information actually. I was lagging behind that. Thank you, thank you. Any other example for restricted items?
Sir, restricted items, sir, we can say in the defense sector. Earlier it was been government to government, but due to this Atmanirbhar package, the government has increased the FDI up to 75%, and it can be automatic route. Earlier it was the government to government.
But there are some things in defense. That means if it is a particular type of artillery which will be used in warfare directly, those things should come under government route. It cannot be automatic.
Like Rafale,
Like the jet fighter, like the fighter plane, like the tanks. Yes, Rafale. So these are the restricted items. Now we can move to present industrial policy. Present industrial policy will keep focus on promoting export. So now we will be coming to foreign investment. Nature and importance of foreign investment, there is a sub part in your unit. So as you know, foreign investment, we already discussed about that in the last class. Foreign investment is important for any country, but it comes in two forms basically. One is foreign direct investment, other one is foreign portfolio investment. So first we will be discussing about foreign direct investment, because this carries utmost importance for a country. Foreign direct investment means an investor invests his money in another nation, in another country, where it makes an establishment, whether in the terms of manufacturing unit, whether in terms of rendering service unit, whether in terms of making retail business, anything, but it makes its presence felt in the host country. So foreign direct investment is favorable for another nation, because whatever investment is done, most part of that investment comes in form of fixed assets initially. And fixed assets cannot be carried to other places at will. So this stays with the country, the infrastructure stays with the country. It also creates employment, though the top level management may be managed by the owner or maybe the colleagues of his country, but there will be a lot of employment opportunity for people in the host country also. And sidewise, the technology which they adopt, and if they adopt a modern technology, others will be motivated to match with them. Automatically their standard of technology, standard of marketing, standard of quality of products will improve if the new manufactured product is of higher quality and if it is using higher technology to be produced. So foreign direct investment, because it stays in the country for a longer period of time, it is important. And of course, one negative point is there. If that industry runs very well, and because the owner is of another country who owns that company, then he has every right to enjoy the profit at his will. So the profit earned, he can reinvest a part of that in our country or in the host country, but it is up to his discretion. He can utilize the entire profit in another country, we don't have any control over that because it is his investment. But we have the investment, we have control over his investment. He cannot take away his fixed assets to other country. So this foreign direct investment is now opened up in many sectors. It is now for retail or service sector, it is up to 100% they are permitted. And when it comes in form of portfolio investment, portfolio basically represents shares, debentures, stock market related things. So in portfolio investment, yes, it contributes to the government, but portfolio investment is not as much important as direct investment. Because what happens in portfolio investment, an investor or an institution which is doing investment at different countries can invest in form of shares by purchasing shares from the stock market of a country. Suppose they have purchased 100,000 shares from our National Stock Exchange or Board of Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange. Suppose they have invested 100,000 from 100 crore rupees. So for that, they don't have any obligation that they will keep their share as long as the government wants. It is their will. They are purchasing, they are investing 100 crore today. After 2 days, if they don't want to invest, and they can sell their shares and go away. And the government don't have any control over that. It cannot insist them to stay with the share. What the benefit government gets? Now, whenever a transaction is taking place in the stock market, when either you are purchasing a share or you are selling a share, you are giving a very nominal percentage of tax to the government, which is known as transaction tax. It amounts to 0.05%. It seems nothing to us because for 10 rupees spent, the purchaser gives 5 paisa share. That means for 100 rupees, for 1000 rupees, it is 5 rupees. For 1000 rupees seller purchase, the government gets 5 rupees. Very small amount. But when you look at the size, the volume of shares in the stock market in terms of trade, every day more than 1,000 and 1,000 of crores are being shares are traded, and in that form government gets the benefit. Otherwise, the government doesn't have any rule to make them stay with the shares for a longer period of time against their will. So these are the two types of foreign investment. The first type is important. Next, anyone who wants to add something to it?
Sir, what is the major difference between that portfolio investment and that FDI?
Okay, I just narrated. Direct investment means it will be invested directly in form of land, building, machineries, manufacturing process, establishing a retail outlet, rendering establishing an infrastructure for rendering a service. Those are direct investment in which infrastructure will be made and it will stay with the host country for a longer period of time. But in case of portfolio management, they are just investing in shares or debentures, and it is up to the investor how long he will stay with those shares or debentures. The government doesn't have any control. They can purchase it today and can sell it tomorrow. So these things will not give any benefit to the government in the long run. But in case of direct investment, because the investor is developing an infrastructure that can be utilized, and for that infrastructure, suppose it is a manufacturing unit, apart from the top management, lot of employment will be created. Lot of our people will get the job. Bank transaction will take place. if it comes through the foreign currency, we will add something to our foreign currency reserve. So more benefits are obtained by a country in form of direct investment, and direct investments are comparatively for long-term basis other than portfolio investment. Okay.
Sir.
Now let us move to foreign investment policy in India. Foreign investment policy. I'll just be taking class for 10-15 minutes more. At 10:30 we will be winding up. Foreign investment policy. In foreign investment policy, that means again policies are made to facilitate process. So if foreign investment policies are made, policies should be made, and policies are made to facilitate foreign investment. So in that regard, what are done? First thing is abolition of licensing. We invite investors from abroad to invest in certain industries which doesn't need licensing, and they can invest up to 100%. They can fully own that particular unit. Then import duty could be relieved to them. Those foreign investors who are establishing their unit, for them also import duty will be exempted. Then for them, the best thing that we are giving them, we are providing them a market with a population of more than 100 crore. So investment policy, main thing is that we should give them, the policy states that we are ready to accommodate you, we are giving you facilities as per as our capability to run your business smoothly. Come and invest here. That is the main policy. That's the main summary of the policy which we are making for foreign investment. And as you know about direct route, we have already discussed. RBI has also given a green signal that companies can talk between them for a joint venture and can establish or can transact through automatic route without the approval of RBI. And for software companies also, the operational norms are liberalized. They can do online maintenance, they can do offline maintenance. For that, they are given some privileges in tax forms. And let me add one or two things which all of you may not be knowing. Indian companies have now access to register themselves in New York Stock Exchange. Those companies, those organizations, Indian companies which are doing very well, they want to be of international standard, they can register their company with New York Stock Exchange, which is supposed to be the biggest stock exchange in the world, NYSE, and that is done through American Depository Receipt, ADR in short it is known as American Depository Receipt. Many of our banks are registered there. To name a few, HDFC, ICICI, they have registered there. And in these cases, you will be astonished that more than the government, private sectors are registered. Because they want to make themselves international, they want to maintain a standard compatible with the international standard. So this is a thing which is made through our policy to allow them to mark their existence in the national field, international field. Then another significant development took place through this policy is that establishment of IRDA, Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. Now it is also known as Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, IRDAI, since 2014 December 1st. So prior to that, let me brief you something about IRDAI because many of you may not be knowing this fact. Previously, there was only one life insurance company, which is known as LIC. So LIC was doing its business, no competitor was there. And from 1956 it was operating. After operating for almost 40 years, 35 years, when we reviewed the performance, government observed only 4%, less than 4% of Indian population is insured. Out of 100 crore, only 4 crore people are insured. And insurance is a is a matter of concern for every country. We will be discussing that in a later class if we have time, because this is another chapter which is not there in this particular paper. So when government observed only 4% people are secured, 4% of bread earners are secured, then for other families what we can do? Because if the bread earner dies, then automatically 4 or 5 members of that family becomes a burden on the country. And for India, if 2 crore people, 2 crore bread earners die every year, then 10 crore of people are becoming burden on Indian government. And if they don't make provision for them, then they have to think of this BPL, this 1 rupee price, all those things like that, and the price come from our tax, our money to serve them. So insurance is necessary. In that regard, at the recommendation of Malhotra Committee, IRDA was formed. The role of IRDA was to allow private insurance companies, private companies to do the business of insurance. The problem in India was that only because LIC was operating, no other organization had the experience of doing insurance business. So they may have money, but they don't have insurance experience. They didn't have insurance experience. So they were permitted to tie up with other insurance companies abroad, to tie up with a foreign insurance company to start the business. But the condition was that because in insurance, whatever premiums are collected, they cannot be dispatched to other countries. That will the insurance deposited amount will be utilized in our country, will be utilized in the host country only. It cannot go abroad. The profit can be invested in other stocks abroad, but the premium amount directly cannot be utilized abroad. It cannot go beyond the national boundary. So the foreign insurance players, they were permitted to participate or to start insurance business jointly with Indian companies, but their maximum permitted share was up to 26% initially. In that regard, ICICI started with Prudential. Prudential is a leading company in UK. India won a World Cup in 1983. Did you know? The first World Cup, Cricket World Cup in 1983. Did you know that? Hello? India won its first Cricket World Cup in 1983. You must be knowing that. Do you know the name of that? Do you know the name of that World Cup? That was Prudential World Cup. Okay. So Prudential is a very old company. Very, very old insurance company. So it started with ICICI. Similarly, other players came. New York Max Life started. So this opened new opportunities in Indian market. Foreign players came, and insurance sector directly or indirectly created huge employment. Huge employment. And in fact, it is the sector where in the period of recession also employment existed, and in the prevailing situation also there is scope of, there is opportunity for employment. So these are the few things. Now inflow of FDI, will moving to inflow of FDI in India. They are represented by some table. So by going through the table, you will just have an impression how funds flow are increasing every year on year, and obviously the objective of any country for funds flow will be to increase year on year. Now it is given country wise also, and you will be surprised to know the inflow of funds is the highest from which country? I am giving you a hint, not from the US. It is from
Sir, Switzerland?
No. You will be surprised to know about this thing. It is from a very small country, very, very small country. That is Mauritius. Mauritius route. Mauritius basically, in Mauritius, most of the companies are owned by Indian persons from Indian origin. So with Mauritius we have a different treaty, bilateral treaty in terms of trade. So it is, let me give you the actual reason. With Mauritius we have a different treaty. Whatever tax is imposed, government tax is imposed on industries in India, the same doesn't hold good in Mauritius. That means Mauritius government doesn't impose that much of tax on an industry established in Mauritius. So many people from Indian origin, they established their units in Mauritius, run their units in Mauritius because only to get tax benefits. And after getting the tax benefit, they get tax benefit and maximum product they export to India. So that Indians need those products, they are utilized, they also get tax benefit, and for that reason they are making huge money, huge money. So it's a surprising fact that Mauritius is the largest trade partner for us, more than the US.
Sir, I don't remember very well, but I had read few years ago that the FDI through Mauritius is indirectly coming through another country. I don't remember the country's name, but it's not exactly from Mauritius. It's just via.
Now, Mauritius has also the provision because when at the time of demonetization also, there was some fact spreading in the market, playing in the market. I have also the same idea that Mauritius, if it is through Mauritius, whatever comes through Mauritius gets a better tax benefit than India. So which are the other countries through which it is coming? I also don't remember that. So nothing to worry also. And we can give more light on that Mauritius route in the next class. You please go through the articles or materials available on that. That will enhance our own knowledge, and knowledge is always good for everyone because it boosts your confidence. And as long as you have the appetite to learn, because only we are talking about trade, foreign trade. It's only now it will be our only duty to know about foreign trade. Doesn't matter. You can enhance your knowledge in every domain, in every field of your interest. Certainly, it gives you confidence. So, because it comes to your mind that yes, though it was stated through money was coming through Mauritius, but by some other countries, please put an extinguisher to that thrust by actually knowing the reason. Okay.
Yes,
So with
sir.
this is actually a very good attitude, because unless you want, and whenever a doubt comes to your mind, let me share my own experience, because still I am studying, and I don't think my study will end up before I die. So whenever I study till now, till date, whenever I come across any doubt, I don't keep that doubt to be cleared after some time or after a day. Whenever a doubt comes to my mind, I immediately at least try to clear that doubt with the available resources what I have. If I have internet, I go through the internet to get more clarity. If I have some material, I go through the material. If I have some books, I go through the books. If I have a knowledgeable person with me, I ask him. I don't hesitate to ask, because knowledge, he might be having much more knowledge than me in a particular field in which he is dealing for the last 40 years. So it's a good attitude, but that attitude can be more flourished if whenever you are having a doubt, you try to get it clear as soon as possible with the available resources. You have to depend on others. So that will make you more confident, and you will be getting into a habit of knowing the things to quench your thirst. So with this, I think our sixth unit is completed, and seventh unit we can just give a briefing of seventh unit. We will not cover it today. We'll be finishing it tomorrow. At the same time, I'll be joining at 8:40. Just about export processing zone, export oriented units, and export houses. In brief, we have already discussed about those things. My request to you is that just go through this unit, export unit 7 unit. We have already discussed in brief EPZ, EOU, export houses, trading houses, star trading houses in brief. You just go through, get a better knowledge. We'll be discussing about all those things tomorrow again, but precisely the points which will address or which will help you to represent something on the paper in your exam. Otherwise, export processing zone, as you assume, it will be an area approved by the government. Whichever institutes or organizations supposed to export their materials to other countries will get a place of land there, will get a piece of land there to establish their unit, like industrial estate. Industrial estate means that particular estate is that particular patch of land, that particular area is specifically meant for business industries to be established. Similarly, infotech parks. Infotech park means this particular area is meant for software companies to establish their offices and to run. Similarly, export processing zone and export oriented units we have already discussed. If someone wants to establish a unit in which all the products are meant to be exported, but they don't get an allotted land in EPZ, export processing zone, they can establish it anywhere, but can obtain a license of, obtain an approval of export, 100% export oriented units, so that they can also enjoy every benefit. So let me add something to export oriented units. What actually means? The main objective is to export all the produced goods to other countries, 100%. But there is a provision that if for a domestic requirement we need that product, then we can utilize up to 50%. It depends on the prevailing scenario, but there is a provision by the government order. Some portion, up to 50%, doesn't mean necessarily every time it will be 50%. It can be used as per the requirement, 20%, 20%, 15%. But a certain percentage of those produced units can be used domestically. But those used person domestically will also be treated as exported, though we are not paying any duty on that, because the products, the raw materials which are imported from other countries to produce that particular product are duty free. The government or the host country has every right to utilize a certain portion of that produced goods in the country to meet its requirement, but it will be treated as export, but export from export oriented unit to fulfill the domestic requirement. Okay, that is a clause in export oriented, 100% export oriented units. And about export houses, you just go through, and we will discuss it in detail tomorrow. So thank you all. Again, it felt nice. Until now, participants have gone down. Initially, it was 18, and long sessions sometimes it feels bored. So thank you all. See you all tomorrow.